Well, Josh, I hope that that little bit of advice from my end was able to help, and others here might be able to chime in as well. And I appreciate you sharing that level of communication you had with your player, and just about the concern. Because look, learning to be a dungeon master is an ongoing process, and you will make mistakes, and you will make bad calls. You will. It happens. It absolutely happens. I make bad calls. Or I think I'm going to present something cool and it ends up turning just sour, right? My players are like, "What? Why are we even here? What are we doing?" Meanwhile, I'm like, "Yeah, this is going to be so awesome." And, and I've been paying attention to, the things that they like, and you think that you're this master crafter, and you may very well be, but for some reason, just, you know, you cast the line, but nothing's biting. If you caught a fish every time you went fishing, it'd be called catching, not fishing. And for being a DM, that's kind of what you do, right? You go out fishing, you cast your line, you hope that they bite, you reel it in, see where you go from there. Your first campaign was nothing but bad calls, so I'm very nervous about that. Josh, if you're willing to communicate and you're willing to learn and talk to others, then you're gonna get better, and it'll be fine. Stick with it, especially because we need more DMs. And every mistake that you make now is how many months or how many years of not making that same mistake going into the future, making you a more confident dungeon master, making you someone who can tell compelling stories, and ultimately to teach other people how to play themselves once you get to the point that you're comfortable doing so. So make your mistakes now. Look, Olympic skiers, if you watch the Winter Olympics, you're like, oh man, those people, those snowboarders, and they're doing all these like flips and stuff, and the skiers that are just zooming down the hill and all. Do you ever think that when they were first learning how to ski, that they fell on their face and, like fell in the snow, broke a leg, probably did some, kind of embarrassing stuff, like, whoa, and kind of, hit a bump and kind of did their first flip, but not nearly as gracefully as they would have liked to do. Or they bump into a tree, or they kind of tumble into a sibling or something because their first time skiing was out with the family. And so, look, these are little baby steps for you. And, you're going to stumble and you'll fall, or you're going to make a bad call. And if you're learning from it and you're not going to be repeating the mistakes, then victory is yours. If your players are understanding or even appreciative that, yes, you may make mistakes, but you're a new DM, and you're the one actually in your group willing to step up and run a game. Not that you have to hold that over their heads like, you're nothing without me. You're going to put up with my, you're going to put up with my antics, whether you like it or not, because I'm the one who runs the games. As long as you're not approaching it like that, Josh, if you're doing exactly what you said, you pulled the player aside, you had some concerns, and you pulled a player aside. I mean, I had to do that kind of recently in the Tuesday game. There was a point about a month and a half ago, maybe. I'm like, yeah, this is going to be cool. We're going to totally do this thing. Was it 2 months now? And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be so much fun. And then when I executed what I thought was going to be cool, it wasn't received the same way that I thought it would. And behind the scenes, I messaged the players and I said, look, I'm sorry. This wasn't as I had intended it to be. And I could just feel that this was just not, it wasn't jiving. And I mean, we'll move forward, but I want you to know that I know. and that I tried something I thought was neat and it didn't work out, and we'll just go from there. I shouldn't approach it like that, especially considering these people are my friends, and also 3 people in the game are capable of running better games than I. All the more reason to talk to them, Josh. Right? Pick their brains. Now, you don't have to give out extra information, right? If you introduce an NPC and the reason for them being there is going to be sort of like the super secret, you know, the big reveal otherwise, or will lead into sort of, you know, the end of the game content. You know, you don't have to have those conversations to justify your decisions, to give out info. I mean, whether they're trying to plumb for it or not, I don't want to suspect that that's the case, but yeah, but what you did is fine. You know, you're talking to people, especially if they have more experience, pick their brain and go from there. And you know what? Try and run a better session the next time. If only by 1%, and then by 1%, and then by 1%, and then one, and after you've been playing for months and months and months, or years, suddenly you are over 100% better as a dungeon master. So I wanted to go, by the way, you probably all have noticed that I have the word desert up on our screen here.
Desert.
There you go. You all know how to pronounce desert now. I have this up because I want to go over a couple basic thoughts for our map that we're going to make. We're actually going to make 2 maps tonight. And that will cap off our week. You know, that'll cap off our I guess we can call it broadcast week, our workshop week. Workshop week sounds really good. The word on screen plus the word of the day are good combinations for a Star Wars reference. Ah, Desert Hermitage. And by the way, dictionary.com, thesaurus.com, as a dungeon master, these are your friends. Absolutely, these are your friends. Now, I have this up because I want to explore what the concept of a desert is, because we may think of it as the Sahara Desert, right? Big rolling sand dunes, and, you know, so it's almost a sea of sand. And, you know, that is a desert, but that is not what a desert always has to be. Right? Any area in which few forms of life can exist because of lack of water, permanent frost, or absence of soil. And if you look, you know, formerly an unsettled area between the Great Mississippi and the Rocky Mountains thought to be unsuitable for human habitation. Now I can tell you that there's a couple trees in between Mississippi and the Rocky Mountains, and yet this was described as a desert. As well, an area of the ocean in which it is believed no marine life exists. There's plenty of water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. In fact, it's not even just the ocean. There are places that are freshwater that, due to a lack of oxygen in the water, and I can show you an example here. Now, this one's local in Castalia. It's simply called the Blue Hole. And it is that. I mean, it's a beautiful blue pond. Right? It has a little walkway around it. And yet the unless they've recently changed it. I saw something mentioned about a fish hatchery, but that could be because there's no fish. And yet, because of natural forces, there just wasn't any oxygen. And so it's pure, it's fresh water. You can drink it. It won't hurt you. But it's just not conducive for supporting life. And as another tip for DMs, not just using dictionarythesaurus.com, or the blue hole was also mentioned because we're talking about using our local newspapers for inspiration. So use your local geography. Just do a Google image search, right? Let's look up deserts. What kind of desert do we want there to be? Because we do have, we have these rolling sand dunes that we're very much used to. And yet, take a look. Not all deserts are completely devoid of life. And not even just if there's something like an oasis around. Now, in the gold rush, the influx of people caused tent cities to be built outside of towns. I'm sorry, what is that in reference to something in particular, Zulerpai? I'm not from the area I'm referring to, but there's a place in New Jersey in the Pine Barrens also called the Blue Hole. It's just a hole in the pond that goes down like 150 feet or more that no one has ever returned from diving in. Ooh. Ooh, I love creepy, like, lore and superstition like that. Now, are there any of you out there that... you don't have to reveal private information, but there's probably someone out there that lives in the west or the southwest, who lives in in an area, and you might be able to confirm that, you know what, this is not the desert that you live in. And in fact, the desert, or if you've just been to Las Vegas, or you've been to other kind of arid areas. Here is a desert. This is the Patagonian Desert in Argentina. Look at all of the vegetation. So we just have to ask ourselves, what kind of a desert do we want to have? From what I understand, I believe I saw an article that Texas, which many of us might consider to be a desert state, has just had its largest bluebell blossoming in history. Like it's just covered in bluebells right now. Oh, gotcha, Zulerpai. Yeah, we can take that into consideration. Oh, the home of the Jersey Devil? Ah, okay. I'm familiar with the Jersey Devil, but I didn't know that's apparently where it lurked. I've been to a volcanic desert. It's got a lot of plants all over it. Yep. And it doesn't just have to be cacti. Cactuses? Cacti? We can have endlessly flat, like, if you see a lot of pictures like this, in the U.S., it's the Pontiac Flats. This one is labeled, the Cracked Earth. Let's see. This is in the Namib Desert in Nambia, Africa. So yeah, we can have just endless flat cracked earth like this. I mean, look, there's even water close by, but it's still a desert. Now, we didn't roll Arctic, so Arctic, could imply a desert on its own. So we're probably not dealing with an Arctic situation. Although, wouldn't that be fun to have some narwhals just kind of hanging out in port? But this is going to give us a good idea for the types of elements that we would want to include. Ah, here's the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. It's a desert, I promise. Is it a desert? And in fact, over on, oh, hello, sheeps. Over on D&D time, the boys Pete and Jeremy in their world have an area that's kind of like this, if I recall correctly. It's a port city, but the sea, for whatever reason, I don't think I've come across the lore for it, but the sea has retreated back, then just leaving a lot of exposed land. And so it's a port city, and there's a bunch of ships that are just sort of sitting out on cracked earth. Cacti is the plural, says English Mudkip. I improvised NPCs traveling from an Arctic region, one of which was a sentient bear named Gur. Oh, was that the thing you introduced then? That forced everyone to run? So anyway, we've done a lot of exploration. We've looked at the term. We've seen that there's a lot of things to consider for our city. You know, things to look at, like what would a desert city have? What would it look like? You know, what would be the plant life, structures, and the like? And so now I believe the next step. Let's take a look once more at our. Let's take a look at our region that we had extracted some info from our well, I guess there are NPCs in a way, but from our player characters if we're going to be their dungeon master. And then we combine that with a couple random rolls to come up with a really good prompt. Hello, Lith. Welcome. Oh, gotcha, Josh. All right. Oh, that's a cool emote, Zulurpai. Oh, that's from Wiccan Dreamer. Oh, very cool. That's a fun owl. All right, so it's on the coast. Hey, you gonna come up and say hi to everyone? We might get a cat butt in a second. Hey. Hey, you. You gonna come up and say hi? Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he's just in kind of a rubby mood. He just wants to... No, Lith, you're fine. It's not like you gotta... It's not like you have to clock in or anything. You're perfectly fine. So we have a... Oh. Hey. Hey. Come on. Yeah, you. Oh, okay. I guess he wants to rub on the box. Huh? Okay. Well... The box is not haunted, I swear, people. It's a cat. There we go. Now we'll get some cat butt. So this is a desert region that lies along a coast, which is fine. That happens. It's not that uncommon. I mean, heck, have any of you played Diablo 2? Do you remember the city of Lut Golain? But look at a lot of other desert coastal cities. The form of government is a hierarchy. So everyone has a place. Everyone responds to someone else. It is very organized, very tiered. There might be some kind of a caste system. If it's not based on merit, it could be. It could just be based on birth or a little bit of both. And of course we could take a look at some inspiration for that, such as with like reincarnation. That you'll find these elements of a caste system in India. This could be a philosophical and or a religious structure as well. I mean, religion does play a part, and especially around water, which is a life-giving substance. And if you take a look at why we say things like "holy cow," or why cows are sacred animals, it's because they are, they're representations of life with, all the things that they can provide. It is seen as a sacred animal, or in this case, we could see water, which of course water has been used in many religions as a sacrament. There's also holy water as a mechanical concept in D&D, and so we can incorporate all of this into our city, into the culture, and into the people. We have giant statues carved out of a mountainside or cliff. And this gave me a very cool idea that the natural harbor that we're talking about. So if you remember, I did just a quick map, just talking about some basic stuff here. If we have a kind of a natural harbor area, we could almost have like the Colossus of Rhodes, or at least two of them, or something here, or this area along the coast. All of this can end up being cliffside. And so it's not necessarily mountainous, right? But watch what we're doing here by implying this. That'll kind of go off the map. And this can come back in. And maybe this one just gets a lot more shallow. But it also runs a longer distance. Right? If we kind of come along and boom. So kind of similar concept. Here's our cliffs. Now this is considering for not doing this topographically. And now watch what happens. What that could mean is we have these natural cliffs that line the harbor, and it comes back down to sort of a low point here, and that's probably where the temple would be centered. Or if this is the low point because this is more of a meandering cliff going down, so that the temple is actually at sea level. Then what that could allow for is for us to have whoops. This society might have carved these faces or these statues into the cliffside. What if you almost get like an Atlas style, or like strength, or in its own way, what if these faces are entrances or exits to the water system, whether it's sewage or even fresh water. And so this can do a lot for us, and this can also help explain. I'm gonna bring up a new map, and we can sketch it out. Yeah, we could put beacons. Amonket says Lith. Quick campaign world recap. Because I'm just seeing this, Luke, and also howdy, Luke. Since I'm just seeing this, I went over the tenants real fast. Were you there for that, or did you sneak in after I went over our cheat sheet for this? Rosia, I need some outside thoughts of my map of the Blood Elf continent. If you want to drop that then into the RPG workshop, you might be able to get some feedback on it. Or you could do that as well. Tretch, I'm so glad you're on. I'm building miniatures, and you're good at keeping the fantasy feel alive. Keeps my sanity. Well, I'm glad, Tretch. This is a dead city or a city with people living in it? Bubonic, this is very much a lively city. This is a thriving, wealthy port city. All right, so anyway, you know what we're going to do? We are going to try and expand this. Is that a little... That was a little bit too much. There we go. That'll work. Now, for the first map we're making, this is simply going to be the region that we're talking about. So I'm not going to worry about city streets, or we're not going to worry about buildings just yet. All I want to do here is sketch out what our region could look like. Yes, they'll have that, right? Because we have the giant statues carved in a mountainside or cliff. There's also a great stone wall that's intact with tower fortifications spaced at 1 mile intervals. We also have some kind of a haunted hill or a barrow mound. It is predominantly lived in by halflings and elves. There is a harmony to them. The ruler is respected, fair, and just. The population is mostly wealthy. This place is also known for its patriotism. This might end up being its own city-state. So we can imagine, you know, if we think back to ancient Greece or even old Rome, while not necessarily desert, there's definitely a lot of, you know, kind of rough, kind of scraggy territory, very stony. And so as we're going through the desert pictures, that could be a part of it too. It's more wasteland, you know. Or think of the free cities that were talked about in Song of Ice and Fire, or Game of Thrones, if you will. And the current calamity is that a dungeon has been discovered, which is having adventurers flock to town. And so we can find a fun way to put a dungeon somewhere in there. There's a big library dedicated to religious study, and the best tavern in town is a quiet, low-key bar called the Drunken Spider. I always imagine lively port cities having a lot of clerics of all walks, and while not necessarily having to have religious diversity in practice, religious acceptance. Yeah, and you'll find that in a lot of metropolitan areas. Coffee Cat is in fact existing. I'm glad. I would like you to continue to exist as long as you're able to do so. And hey, you know what, Coffee Cat? Sit back, because you're gonna get an A+ art stream from Matty Morgs here. That's right. We got MS Paint all fired up. I have my standard mouse. and and so we're gonna get to work. Now, because of Let's see. Because of this, we want some cliffside, some sea cliffs. Oh, you are also arting. Here's some good examples. I love sea arches. I know I've already put them into a couple. I've put them into a couple maps we've done so far. So maybe I should challenge myself not to not to do so. But if you take a look here, some nice seaside cliffs, and see this could be the area where we get down to sea level with our city. Have a little keep or some beacons or a lighthouse. Something that might look a little bit more deserty. I mean, so there's grass and there's nothing wrong with that. I know we could look at what the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. Something like this could be cool, where we have these other little spires that are close to shore. You know, in the cliffs where they've met up, there's a beach that's formed. The town can also be incorporated into the cliffside. Ah. Get some minarets going here. So much stuff that we can find. Alright, well, I'm going to spend a lot of time just looking at pictures if we don't put some ink on our digital canvas. Greatly anticipating the next session of VTM and Chroma Company. I have a weird thought of karst mountains, says Oldport. Natural sea coastal architecture is breathtaking. I looked at a lot for inspiration for my new setting's Greek-like setting. Oh, well, welcome back, Shukan, for the 15 minutes we have you. What's the town's geography? Our inspiration was coast and desert. Yep, the Seaside Seagull ambiance. You're welcome to it, Tretch. We want to get inspired. Do you have any suggestions for a CR8 encounter of 4 players? Not offhand. I'd have to look in the monster manual. If you want some inspiration, Shukan, if you have the chance, look up Kobold Fight Club. And that's a good encounter builder that can give you suggestions based on region or CR and the like. And hello, New Monica. All right, let's put some ink down, shall we? Coastal region, desert. Because of how wealthy the people are here, I'm gonna presume that there's one or more harbors, and I would imagine at least one of them is a wonderful, like a natural deep water port, so that a lot of bigger ships can come and go through there. And if that's the case, you know, and especially, because we had this quasi-Underdark feel, the cliffs could also be lived inside of, and not just upon or built on its face. So everything's a hobbit hole. draw just kind of whatever squiggles. If you want to do this by hand, a good way to go about it is to get like a handful of beans or rice and just kind of make a pile and then draw around it. All right, so here's a good natural port. As the waves are coming in, look at that. Only a little bit of them at an angle could even get in. So this is going to be some nice deep water here. In fact, we could even kind of have this be split out this way. And the city could even be between. This is a... I said I wouldn't make a big archway, but we could either make like an underground tunnel going through the sea, or like that the sea will go between, or we could make this an archway here if we really wanted to. The dock leads up to the entrance of Petra, with most of the town being carved out of the cliff face, like the Anasazi. And welcome back, Marbo, man. It's good to see you. So we can probably have the cliffs rise up like such. This one might get really close. And maybe it dips back down over here. It picks up again right about here. And this might even just have its own little low areas, smaller on this side. And you know what? We're just gonna be creative. What are your players gonna say? This is ruining my immersion. We're supposed to be playing D&D, and you're showing me this. All right, so here, boop, boop. If any artists are out there, saying boop when you do this is a tried and true artistic method that all good artists say and use. And if you don't say boop, then I guess it just doesn't really count. So here's more of our beach area. Now, for all I know, this is 3 miles. We haven't developed a scale, and that's fine. Right now, I just want to create. I want to feel inspired. Let's create some topography. Apparently, the desert's creeping in. Let's create some topography, and let's just start making a story about this place. This is gonna get pretty yellow. So see where this goes. Now, sand is going to be like water. And what this is going to indicate will be, will be where the cliffs start rising up. And so that it's harder for the sand to go up because it'll fall back down with wind and if there is any rain and the like. So for the most part, we can have a large desert area out here. In which case, this is really, we're going to fill this in with a kind of that sandy look. And this could be more, it could be more of a, wasteland, kind of arid, before we get out to desert proper. Oh no, this map, my immersion's been ruined. Yes, Solar Pie, right? So 2 coastal deserts actually exist in the world. One is in Namibia, one is in Chile. Both are really built up with rather major cities in them. And, having been to Lima, Peru, I mean, that is also a very populous desert region next to a coast. Hey, Gidlock. Yeah, thank you for the happy Saturday, and to you as well. It's good seeing you back here. Now, what we can do is, if we wanted to put in some topography lines, there's a couple ways we can do it. If we really wanted to get detailed, then we could zoom in and add our lines, right? Kind of come along this way. And we could say every line is 20 feet or 50 feet or, I mean, so of course that's gonna make the scale, that's gonna make the scale in its own way a little bit more interesting. But we can also just generally refer to, I don't know, we could just say every line is 100 feet or even 200 feet of elevation. We can also, if we really wanted to get detailed, we can simply zoom in and scroll down. And then we can add some more subtle lines. So, we get something thinner. And then we can come in like this and build up, showing our elevation is increasing. And remember, the closer that your lines are together, that is showing a steeper ascent or descent. If your lines are further apart, now it's starting to slow down because it is taking more lateral area to, more run over rise to get the same effect. So now this has started to slow down at the top of the cliff. And then if we really wanted to, we could go whoop. Uh-oh, so it's like a super sharp peak right here. And then if we zoom back out, you can see how detailed this is starting to look. I'm not going to spend a ton of time doing this with our map making session. Not that this has to be a super complex map, but it doesn't hurt to talk about topography when you're doing this stuff. In its own way, we could even continue those lines if we wanted to. Because that doesn't mean that this is absolutely flat, because we can still have, we could still show the ultimate topography of the area here. Right? And we can go through and do this. But this is a very You were on my desk. You can come up again. Come on. Don't just paw at me. Come on. Action. You can rub against miniatures also then, I suppose. Now, our city, I want to put in a gray area. That way we're showing, you know, what is the area that's going to be more heavily developed. And for the most part, it is going to be here along the cliff and along the coasts. Come on. And we can also imply that it does go down the cliffside as well. The minis have been blessed. That's true. If any of you want that Dungeon of the Mad Mage, it has been twice blessed by a cat. Now, depending on the available water, and that's something else we're going to want to consider, it's fine if we just have open desert that is, you know, for the most part, you know, probably inaccessible. If we really wanted to, we could end up putting something like an oasis, which would be a natural spring, which, you know, would indicate that there's a, you know, water that is close to the surface there, springing up. Depending on the rainfall on the cliffs, that could mean that an oasis could simply be fed by water or wastewater that flows down this way. And so it's more of a, you know, it could be more of a, like a soupy kind of a desert swamp. You know, it doesn't get a lot of cycling water coming through it. Your cat was doing a lot of the same during your stream earlier. Oh, I know. Look at that face. He loves the scritches. That's mostly because about every time that I touch him, about 10 pounds of hair falls off. And this is the season for him to shed his fur as much as he can. Because it is getting warmer. Go just the indication that we do have some piers of some kind jutting out into the water. I mean, there could very well be more than this, but just to give that indication. We're going to also have to get some food from somewhere. Now, a lot of it can be, you know, shipped in. You know, we have these ports. It's a very wealthy area. Though, if we're going to be talking about things like wastewater, or last night we also talked about they could be using their water system if their local nature clerics are desalinating the water. They could also be the ones that are making kind of a desert swamp by pumping or having this low point. We could actually make kind of it's not a septic tank per se. Let's see. So if all this is rolling down, the low point is probably going to be, this is rolling down as well. And no. So right out here, why don't we, it's kind of an oasis. It's more like a marsh. Why don't we have this be a lowland area? That it has water, and it's not all necessarily bad. But this is where, you know, a lot of the waste flushes back out to filter through the desert. And any of the plants that grow out there, of course, can be harvested. And the muck that's left behind then can go to develop the farmlands and to try and push back the desert by creating a soil layer. Because, of course, here in our definition of a desert, an area in which few forms of life can exist because of lack of water, permanent frost, or absence of soil. And so what better way to start making soil than by having decomposing organic matter? And yes, that includes poo. And you may find that your local wastewater treatment facility does something similar, where they take the solid waste that's been filtered out of the water, they'll spread it out, they'll let it dry, then they'll scrape it up and sell it to farmers as manure, because it's rich in nutrients. If I fits, I sits. Yes, he does that as well. Yeah, I know. He's using me. That he's playing me like a fiddle, and that's fine. One of the vanished civilizations in Chile were very good at engineering to bring water down from the mountains and canals to irrigate near the coast. Got to think like a cat, and the cat is not lazy, but it definitely enjoys having someone do it for them. Yeah, and you know it's contact. It's something fun that we can do. The town could be attempting to create a desert floodplain. So yeah, if we're not going to include, and this could be a good challenge, if we're not going to include a source of fresh water, like a river, then right now we're saying that nature magic is the one doing the conversion. So it's a very faith-based society, which that could also be, to tie into the city's economics. If we're having magical desalination, they could also be selling salt, which salt back in Get Ye Flask times was very valuable. I mean, that's how we came to the term salary. Salt does a lot of things, including preserve food, which when you don't have refrigeration is very important. And so we might actually have our nature temples that worship the sea and marine life could end up being effectively big desalination plants that sell salt, and they also sell the water. And that's how they remain culturally, religiously, and economically relevant. So we could very much have things like the canals that you were saying that would just run openly down through the city to this low point. So they're not exactly they're kind of irrigation canals. It's just more irrigation canals for wastewater. We kind of drew a kidney, and we're kind of talking about kidney style functions. Now remember, water, unless you're forcing it or pumping it some other way, water seeks its own level and will follow the shape of the land. So if this is how this drainage canal goes, we're getting a feel for the land, and we're already getting some topography. The central area, there could also just be, honestly, some drainage out to sea. But we can even have things split. This is almost like a delta of wastewater flowing out. And so everyone wants to build to the south, especially because the the scent carried on the winds is going to be far sweeter than that carried from the north. And, if this is some desert, some marshlands, things like marshes and wetlands do act in its own way, kind of like a natural kidney for an ecosystem. It could be inadvertently very appropriate that we drew things the way that we did. Still is pretty expensive when you get outside the ionized salts. They would definitely use the water to irrigate sallow farmlands. Some things do grow in sand pretty well. Yeah, like spinach and some other vegetables do. I can name one that does excellent, and it's Earth's #1 food. Yeah, hey, throw out some ideas, Bubonic. So it flows out here to this, to like the marshlands. And by the way, Zuler Pie, this could end up being where that secondary, like that tent city is growing up. And so from here, this is where they scrape up all of the decomposing matter, the organic muck, and that could either then be taken back to the city on some sort of a highway system, or it could be brought closer. You know, if the cliffs aren't terribly rocky, or if the cliffs do have some soil and other plant life growing here, it could be brought back up. But we can indicate maybe with what would stand out here. Here we go. We can keep it kind of close. Maybe it's gone a little bit that way. We're seeing that you know, so it's not exactly, you know, pure drinking water. That's fit for public consumption broadly, especially not amongst the wealthy. But we can see that there is some grass and vegetation. It's not as deserty. It's not as wastelandy. Here. Whoops. There's a gap somewhere. Who's the traitor? It was me the whole time. Potatoes, asparagus, turnips, onions, garlic, beets, radish, carrots, all sand-based vegetables. And broccoli, I think, does well, as doesn't it? Old Port? Rice? Coastal South Carolina is almost entirely sand-based. And do you know what South Carolina's #1 agricultural export is? Rice. Yeah, I mean, so rice could grow here. As well, you know, make it in a, kind of this sand, organic matter, water slurry. Especially if we do have, you know, if we have tiered cliffs, and you know, we could set up kind of a rice paddy system. Old Port says, I prefer to acknowledge that broccoli doesn't exist. I mean, if we're just talking about steamed stems, I would agree. But when you get the florets, and you get a little bit of butter, maybe some Mrs. Dash on them. Oh. Now we're talking. Let's see, if we're thinking about sort of, you know, rocky cliffside areas as well, wouldn't this be a good location for olive trees to grow? You know, could we have some olive orchards here on the Seaside cliffs? I don't know if it's really good for grapes, so I don't know if we're really in grape territory. Raw broccoli with ranch dressing? Maybe. So these canals can also provide transportation going back up. Especially because, look, you know, stuff is going to leach out. You know, water nutrients are going to leach out. That's how we're going to get this, you know, the more grassy, kind of more than just scrub brush growing around it. I don't think we really have a forest per se, unless something happens, like, you know, the nature temple has planted and cares for a coastal forest to keep the boat building and service industry alive. In which case, you know, that could be artificially manufactured, or resources could go, if we really wanted to say, all right, so let's grow a forest, you know, somewhere along the water, somewhere kind of bordering the swamp, so that we do have a source of wood for structures and for keeping the fleet of ships in tip-top shape, since that's a huge economical undertaking. And if we're already talking about things like faith magic and economics, we have to take that into consideration. Where would they be applying their immense resources and influence? If they're already selling salt, if they're already selling water, if they're already selling services of the you know, of faith, of spirit, what is that going to invest in? And when I say selling, it doesn't mean it has to be a nefarious organization or anything along those lines. Now, of course, this, with the linchpin of the city being this faith and the services it provides, obviously that's a good target for corruption. But it doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be evil right out the get-go. And what would they invest in, and what would they do? Especially if it's a nature temple, bringing in trees. They could be, you know, mighty hardwoods that just, honestly, they bought some acorns off of some traders and decided to make an oak grove. And they transplanted it here. And it's more of a source of pride and faith that it exists than anything else. Or they could have orchards of olive trees, or some other hardier, dates. Figs and dates, right? Let's think to arid climates. You know, we could think to the Middle East as an example if we wish to. Figs and dates can work really well. Marlboro says peanuts. Hey, cactus fields. You want to talk about a way to preserve water? What if this is actually, let's go back to our desert area. You know, when we talk about grass and such, it could honestly just be a bunch of succulents like cacti. That could be a way to help retain and preserve water in the land. So we could put out this way then. I'll do this with orange. Maybe in between here, this actually becomes, you know, close enough to being considered farmland. Not arid, but arable farmland. And it doesn't, and it doesn't have to grow, you know, what the traditional crops we may think of, you all have done an excellent job in chat up above talking about hardier style veggies or fruits that could exist out here. You know, so we would have a grain, right? Grain is a cornerstone of our existence. You know, because of all the manual labor, carbs don't necessarily matter as much. And so we have a grain, we have a starch with potatoes. So we could grow rice, we could grow potatoes. Then we have some greens. That could be things like spinach or broccoli. Some other root crop that's not necessarily starchy. Garlic and beets and radishes. Asparagus is that cruciferous like broccoli? Would that count as a green? It's not a leafy green. You can also get white asparagus. I don't know if any of you have had white asparagus. But anyway, so we have some veggies, some fruits that could live out here. Oh, and some olive trees could work as well. If cactus exists, someone's getting hurt by one. Old Port Media, you know what would be really fun? If we had a combat, you know, in our minds, right? We're creating an adventuring area. What if we had a combat in a heavily populated cactus field? You want to talk about a stage hazard? Or something that could complicate a fight? Yeah, you could hide behind the cacti, but you can't get too close. And also think about things like grappling and push and pull effects, where you can, you know, slam yourself or others, or you could be slammed, or you could slam others into the cacti. You could use it as cover, but it's dangerous cover. It's kind of open at the same time. Everything's difficult terrain if you don't want to risk possibly tripping in the sands and falling face first into a cactus. That would be an awesome place to have a fight. Marlboro says coconuts. Blowing cactus up, needles everywhere. Yeah. Yep. Olives and dates. And oh yeah, olive oil could be used as a preservative as well. So let's do this. Let's say that there's some farmland kind of out by the kidney here. I mean, that could even be what it's called, the kidney. And so this will actually extend a little ways. Because the farms can still just siphon off this stuff. But let's fill in the farmland. Kind of just in a ring. Probably not too much. For whatever reason, the further north you go, maybe it becomes more hostile. The weather, the winds don't favor what you're doing. So orange will be our farmland. In fact, we could even do something like this. We could fill this in with a lighter orange, like so. And kind of like what we did for the swamp area, we could even go and add... you know, just like some lines to show, oh, so this is where, you know, this is where crops are planted. Because this generally, you know, adding rows generally indicates, you know, farming activity that's happening. So here is our bread basket of sorts. And we can also then put in, it's probably an area then up. We said that there's a wall. And the wall doesn't necessarily have to abide by, It says a great stone wall that's intact with tower fortifications. It doesn't mean it has to be all completely manufactured like the Great Wall of China. The wall could simply be a series of towers along the cliff. And the towers themselves could then be just areas of support. And if we have a central church that's administering to things like guiding people, you know, by being a lighthouse of a kind, we could have these towers almost do things like harness the seaside wind and be little, you know, manufacturers of fresh water and the like. And we can have these little like groves that grow around the towers, because the towers are providing a national security function, a function of faith, and they're also helping to provide the soldiers something to do, as well as acting as yet another commodity. Maybe for some reason there's like a couple towers here, and we could connect it all if we really wanted to. In fact, maybe all this up here has been developed and is grassy, because this is very nice. Like, this is the posh area of the city. There could be some people who even live up here, but, you know, the main crush of the city is down here, a little bit closer to the water line. But this could very well be developed as more of a park than a resource gathering area. But we go through, and there's these little pockets of life that are... I said little pockets of life that are growing around these towers. Ahem. Boy, I'm missing this. I tell you what. And maybe so that they could have developed as a bit of a windbreak, or to act as a signal in a way. A bit of a forest. And you know what would be really cool? If you're describing this area to your players, and as you are, you know, you're saying, you know, they don't have to be mighty oaks. They can, which can add to the mystery of the place. Because they're like, whoa, what are these hardwoods doing in the middle of a desert area? Oh, well, they've been traded. And so if you want, you know, hickories and walnuts and the like, you could have those here. This could be more of an orchard of citrus-bearing fruit, right? Because you definitely need vitamin C if you're going to be doing a lot of sailing. Although olives, I think, another good part of olives were they provided vitamin C. Can one of you look up a nutritional label for olives or olive oil or the like? But think of it this way too. As you're describing your player characters rolling up to the town, so like here's the water, then here's the cliffside, and all of the trees could be actually growing at an angle like this. Because of the constant sea breezes and being bent back. So you almost have this like curved wall that the wind and everything is shaping as it rushes up the side of the cliff and just is applying this force. And so, of course, you know, that could also help because you don't want to lose any precious fruit over the side of the cliff. So if there is a windfall of you know, nuts or fruits or just other bounties, they would actually be blown back and kind of roll back from the cliffside a little bit. So let's continue to put our little like humidity collectors, our evening dew collectors. Again, maybe there's sort of like a long one where these were some of the first towers, maybe. And so they've been so influential for so long that they kind of continue to grow and overgrew. And maybe, you know what? No, maybe that's the extent of it right there. And so we're abiding by our prompt. We're playing into the economics of the situation. And you know what? If you want these to be every other, or if you want all of these to be little copses of trees, you know, when I say forest, it could be a forest of cacti. You know, it also doesn't have to be super densely populated. It's just that trees are actually growing here on the sides of the cliff. And the trees could be, you know, any number of things. Desert-based alcohols. There's a plant called the desert spoon, which produces a liquor called sotol. I have not heard of that, Old Port. Is it very rare or uncommon in these parts? Or is that something you think I could go to you know, like a specialty, like an importer wine or liquor store to find? Bubonic One says, I found a real fruit that grows excellent in sand. What does the South have that every other part of the country love this time of year? You're saying olives are high in vitamin E, iron, copper, calcium, and sodium. No vitamin C in olives. Hey, Orc, welcome. All right, so we'll definitely want a source of vitamin C. Interesting fact. Besides humans, the only other mammals that can't produce their own vitamin C are what? Do any of you know out there? There's one other mammal that can't make its own vitamin C. And so in our evolutionary growth or grand design, whatever you want to subscribe to, that's fine. We can't make our own vitamin C. That's why we have to, you know, that's why we get scurvy. What is the other mammal that cannot do it themselves? Zularpie, you found that olives do make vitamin C. Come on, people. What do you people like to eat this time of year that's a fruit? Watermelons, yes. Watermelon is definitely starting to come around. Have you had a watermelon salsa? It's good. Nelshear, welcome. Good to see you again. They make it from East Texas to Chihuahua, Mexico. Oh, okay. Well then. Some vitamin C, but depends on the olive variety and not a great source. Apes? Not apes. Horses. Old Port says 1 cup of raw chopped mustard spinach provides 195 milligrams of vitamin C, or 217% of the daily value. Kale provides 80 milligrams, or 89%. Both are desert viable crops. You know, I've had baked kale. In fact, so if you take kale, I know that it's kind of a meme to hate on kale. If you take kale leaves, you can bake them and they become really crispy, kind of like chips. Now, they're not as structured. They're not good for dipping. But if you give them a little spray of olive oil, and again, you could put some Mrs. Dash or something on them if you want. And I keep saying Mrs. Dash because Mrs. Dash doesn't have salt in it. And depending on how much salt you get, I mean, hey, we're talking first world problems. Oh my gosh, I'm just getting so much salt in my diet. It is causing health problems. I have access to so many grains and sugar that I am having health problems. What a world, right? From the one that we're building and going here to from here to our modern world, or from our modern world going back in time, where these people are like, we gotta get vitamin C because we're gonna be very bad off. Yeah, kale is very cheap. Hey, Hypnotic. Kale, seaweed. You better believe that there's gonna be an aquaculture. You don't think that they're gonna be growing nori or some other edible seaweed? Mm-hmm. Yo, says Hypnotic Gamer. We're talking about desert viable crops and whatnot that could be grown in the environment that we have manufactured. So we have the positions of our towers on here now. For the statues, remember that prompt. There are giant statues carved out of a mountainside or cliff. What kind of statues would be carved? Are they scenes? Remember that this is a hierarchy of elves and halflings primarily. Is it more religious iconography? Is this perhaps some big, mean, menacing soldiers to scare people away who might want to make war with this very affluent place? Is it more of the working people, kind of the old communist propaganda where everyone is muscular and is wielding a tool, you know, a hammer or a sickle, or they're engaging in industry with a wrench? You know, are we getting this kind of a thing? Are also to that end, are we seeing this as like kind of like big Art Deco style? You know, kind of like Tim Burton's Gotham or Rapture from BioShock, kind of you know, so the statues kind of look like the Oscar award or these other Art Deco kind of stylized Adonis looking characters? Or are we going for something like the it's not the Maori that did the Easter Island faces, but anyway, it's something more something that conveys a body or a face or even an emotion, but it's a more of a stylized or like maybe like a primitive style? Or do these people take themselves seriously? I mean, because again, we want to talk about things like propaganda. This place is known for its patriotism. That's why this is almost a city-state unto itself, and why I have no problem mentioning things like Rome, or if we're talking Greece, especially if we're talking about this kind of, you know, rocky, cliffy area. We're talking about growing broccoli and olives and all this other stuff. Rapa Nui. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Maori. Maori. I knew it was an improper guess, but I wanted to convey a people made the faces. Seaweed doesn't have a lot of vitamin C, but it's good for other important stuff in them, and it's easy to get. Yes, and we do have a respected, fair, and just ruler. Now, we have a hierarchy. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a king. It could be. Something that we had entertained is actually an outsider is the one that's managing the city, because the halflings and elves are living in harmony, and maybe they always have. Or maybe there was a bit of a civil war that threatened to pull things apart. And if any of you live in a city that has a city council, but also a city manager, what you'll have are your city commissioners are the ones that are elected from the people. And so they're supposed to be the representatives. Then the city council, or your commissioners, will hire a city manager. And so you have an executive. You know, he's the one that pulls the trigger on things, and he's the one, he's the one that is then hired to execute the legislation that the elected officials vote on or bring up or hear the public about. And so we could actually have this city-state that could be ruled by a dragonborn, a tiefling, a human, because the ruler, who is respected, fair, and just, was hired for that reason. And because the ruler doesn't have a horse in that race. I guess that's an interesting way of saying, because halflings and elves are different races. Anyway, you get what I'm saying, right? So they're not personally invested. It's not like a halfling can come to this person and make the appeal of, oh, but our halfling traditions. You have an outsider. It could even be a gnome. I don't know. Gnomes are, in fact, a gnome could work because gnomes mechanically don't have Fey heritage, but gnomes have fey heritage, much like elves, and they're also the same size as halflings. And so you're kind of you can understand aspects of life in both camps. That could also lead, if we want to go by a general, gnomes tend to be inventive. Gnomes tend to be very organized in a fashion. I mean, they could be manic about their inventions and other things. But we could have this, we could have a small enclave of gnomes that are the ones who are enacting the hierarchy, because they are a neutral race between the dominant halflings and the minority elves. And with all the races that are coming and going from this port area here, this is an excellent opportunity for you as a dungeon master to include or exclude whatever you want from your world. All right, so for the most part, everyone, I believe that we have a really good idea for what the region looks like. We've helped to bring it to life. Now, of course, we could spend a lot of time. We could zoom in. We can draw our towers. We can indicate that all of I was even going to say olives. All of the eastern shores are olives, and all of the western shores are dates. Tomb of Annihilation, please. You got it, Hypnotic Gamer. In fact, because we're wrapping this up, I can pop open that box of Tomb of Annihilation here right quick. Acerola cherries grow well in sandy areas. Maybe someone figured this out, and some of the trees growing on the cliffs are cherry trees. And you know what? We could even take... how about this, Bubonic One? So traditionally, we think of cherries as coming from trees, which, I mean, that's what they do. What if we took your idea, Bubonic One, and we had cherries growing like watermelons? Watermelons are technically berries. I hope I'm not blowing people's minds, and your reality is unraveling tonight when you realize this horses can't make vitamin C. At least as far as I remember. Or was it another mammal? One other mammal can't, and I think it's horses. So, if I'm wrong, then sorry. I was definitely speaking with conviction, because there is another mammal that can't do it. I may have misremembered. But anyway. So, watermelons are berries. They grow along the ground. What if we have cherries that grow like watermelons? And, in a sense, then, are treated like grapes. And we have sea grapes. If any of you live in a beachy area in the south, you might know of sea grapes. I'll keep saying that you have been the best streamer all around because you have helped me personally and helped me understand what I need to do for myself. Hypnotic, that means an awful lot to me, and thank you, and I hope to continue to be whatever I am to you. A friend, a mentor, a confidant, someone who's inspirational with life or fiction or whatever. I'm happy to be here and to offer not just myself, but I mean, I can't exist without all of you as well. It's reciprocal. And if I ever come across as being detached from that system, that I'm somehow better than you all on a broad or an individual basis, if I come across that, you know, I have all the answers, then I need to get out of streaming, and I'm in the wrong business for that. Cactus fruit is probably a thing. Cactus fruit as in like prickly pears? I've seen the term nopales before. Okay, got it. So yeah, these are all things to consider, and we could label it. Again, we have our wall, we have our towers. We can put the library. In fact, the library dedicated to religious study would probably be you know, the forefront. It could even be a watchtower and even a great monument or statue itself. And we could place that here. We'll use something that stands out really well. We're going to put our library, boom. Everyone who comes to this area will be attracted by this religious library that is providing, you know, a lot of water and such. And that's why, you know, so that's the mainstay for keeping this place so fertile. But it's also a giant beacon of hope, of light, of, you know, of welcoming the clouds and the winds and, you know, even the storms. In fact, we could probably even have, I keep thinking of stuff, everyone. We could even have on this cliffside here, not just the water from the desalination temples that are lower here. We could even place like a public reservoir or some sort of like a central area that is made by a small river that flows down from the central library. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to, it will eventually continue, but this could also be a source for recreation. This could be a source to get fresh, clean water in a city like this. And it's also another way that this faith can, serve the people who live here. Now, one more landmark that we do need to indicate. I mean, we could put the Drunken Spider, you know, anywhere we'd like. But we have a... here we go. A haunted hill or a barrow mound. Now, this is the weird locale. Where do we want this? And why is it haunted? Either it is haunted or it's haunted. Are we talking about maybe... Was there some ruins of a city that was covered up by the desert over here? Is the haunted hill actually... it could be a statue or it could be a part of the cliff face. And I don't know, maybe the story was that the city-state was tracking down some nefarious, some smugglers, or some other, you know, ne'er-do-wells, slavers, or something like that. And you know, everyone was killed to the last man, and we're talking the slavers, we're talking the men, women, and children that they were smuggling, and even the people that were rescuing them, and no one knows what killed everyone inside this tower. And you know what? The towers probably go down to the sea, like they're a part of the cliffside built into it, so that they can get down to sea level, and you have a small, you know, like, and so every tower could have a dock or something as well for supplies, or to go and help someone if there's a ship in distress. They can send some boats out from the cliffside to help people as a service, right? You want to serve the merchants that are coming to your area. But anyway, so for some reason, something happened and everyone in the tower died. That could be a haunted barrow or a mound. Or again, we're working with a desert. Is there a haunted sand dune? You know, was there a lost caravan at some point in time? A lost city, or even an old shrine before this faith of worshiping nature took hold? Was there something else? Was there something maybe a little bit more nefarious? You know, were cultists or some other sort of religious pilgrim driven to the desert and managed to, and they were actually sort of in their own way the founders of this place by scraping together a living. But then they were found by their pursuers and put to the sword. They were buried in the desert, but the pursuers decided to stay and build this city. And so is it the old cultist hill, you know, kind of a thing? Or is it something that, you know, on one of the cliffs? It doesn't even have to be on the edge, but somewhere up high. You know, Old Man McGillicuddy, the wealthy merchant, decided to make his house on the hill. And the hill is haunted for some reason. This could have been the site of a Civil War battle, or just a war battle, a naval battle. And so many people died on this hill. A hill doesn't have to be a little, like, 100-foot, you know, wide, 20-foot high little mound. We could talk that there is There's a haunted cliffside. What happened? Did an entire navy, dash against the rocks and thousands of men and women die? And so for days their bodies were just washing up into the rocks and disappearing. So maybe the tunnels, because we're talking about tunnels going through the hills and everything. And so it's rumored that the tunnels are filled with the old drowned corpses and skeletons of the sailors that died on the night of storms. Where their bodies go. Because, only 10 were drawn out or something along those lines. But 10,000 went in, but only 10 bodies were found. And where did the other ones go? Did the sharks get them? Were they just sort of crushed up on the rocks? Or are they still inhabiting the tunnels underneath this cliff? Ooh. Now we're getting culture. We're getting the supernatural. And as a dungeon master, this is going to empower you with so many thoughts and stories. And if your players bring up questions that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have been prepared to answer, you can very quickly improvise an answer because you have a general knowledge of what's going on. Let's see. I missed some chat here. Maddie's best dude, thank you very much, Coffee Cat. Grapes are also good for making alcohol. Yeah, I don't know if this is really grape territory, though, Bubonic. And again, unless we want to make something cool. And so if we call them sand cherries, then we're going to be a little bit more immersive, because we can talk about this fantasy fruit, sand cherries, that bring we even have a character named Maraschino. Of course we have to have cherries. So here we go. We now have sand cherries. We've invented it. Welcome to our D&D fantasy world. We grow sand cherries. Is it a hill with a ton of ghosts? It could be. The drunken spider makes cherry melon alcohol that you can't get anywhere else. Kind of in Atlantis. We could, in fact, Hypnotic Gamer, because we're looking at things like Seaside Cliffs. Our haunted hill could be something like... hold on a tick. I'm sure I'll find an example. I mean, if we're looking at Greece, they're going to be everywhere. I should just look at that. Oh, okay. Here we go. So if we're on the mainland, right? If we're considering ourselves on the mainland here, and we look out and whatever, we'll just make it up. Half a mile offshore is a rocky, is its own little rocky, cliffside, whatever. This could be the haunted hill or the Barrow Mound. This could be the haunted hill or the Barrow Mound that's separated from the cliffside, and of course, there is a watchtower over it. But no, everyone presumes the reason why, because that watchtower acts like all the other watchtowers. Except for some reason, it's continually stocked with paladins. Why is that? When all the other ones have rangers, or whatever. Look at that. So here we go. Here's our haunted hill. Everywhere else normal. Why is this haunted? If we wanted to do that. Because that's something we have not added. That's something that we have not added to the photo that this place would most likely have. Which would be some of these like little islands just right off of the beach. So we can even add a couple of these. An ancient indigenous people's ritual site? Yeah, Coffee, that's a good, that could be a good example too. So the old ways, the old religion, might still be hanging around. So in that case, it might not even be haunted. It could just be actually a religious manifestation that's not, ghosts and skeletons, but, the sounds that issue forth from the circle of stones on the old hill or something could very well just be echoes of the past. that seem kind of haunted and spooky. You know, because Foxfire, the Foxfire spell goes off, or Dancing Lights. But it's not undead haunted. It's just haunted by a presence. Could be haunted by a fey presence. Right? I know that we immediately go to undead, and heck, I was doing it as well. Haunted could just be a rumor. It could be bandits that have set up a camp and just keep the charade alive. It could be haunted by fey. Because fey are very haunting creatures. They are supernatural creatures. It could be haunted with, Chult in Forgotten Realms has their native dwarves are albino, right? And so there could be just an island out here that have, pygmy versions of something, albino versions of something, or just otherwise it is a primitive culture. In the news not that long ago, there's that primitive culture living on an island off of India that ended up killing someone who went onto their tribal lands. That could be what is haunting. No one might know the natives, but or it could be even, I don't know, a bunch of spiders. Bunch of monstrous spiders. Phase spiders. You want to talk about things that can seem haunting? A bunch of phase spiders live on that island. And so creepy stuff is seen, but it's a monstrous infestation. And of course, woe be to anyone who brings back samples of phase spiders to the big city, because what could wreak havoc and harm than if we have a nest of these phase spider monsters living right here? No one goes to it, but of course, you're going to get the teens, that are going to go out here on a challenge, or there's going to be smugglers or bandits or poachers who think like, yeah, no, we're going to be the ones who do this. And they keep dying because they keep getting eaten by Jurassic Park. Because the dinosaurs are haunting it. Or again, you have these spiders that would just love to live in the seaside cliffs. Because maybe that's what they do here. And if one ever got to the mainland, fortunately phase spiders probably don't like rough seas. And if this is 20 miles away, or whatever, if this is 20 miles away, they've been contained to this island, mercifully. But now we have an adventure, don't we? We have a very interesting circumstance that doesn't even have to have a villain, like the big bad evil guy. Could have just been an accident. A poacher got lucky, ended up with a clutch of phase spider eggs. On the way back, the eggs hatched, and I don't know if 20 miles is really enough distance for something like this to occur. We could say this is 500 miles or whatever. The phase spider eggs hatched. Days later, the adrift ship crashed up against the cliffside and released the spiders into the cliff. And now the cliffs are infested with spiders, and you have to go on a mission to clean out the caverns. Because if these things spread outside of, containment zone, and if they actually ever get to the city, that could be terrible. And so we're not talking about an arch-lich hoping to decimate the souls of the world, which can be a cool villain. In this case, we had an oopsie-doodle that ended up releasing a natural force into this otherwise peaceable area, and you got to go in and do crowd control in a very claustrophobic environment. So how do you want to tell me this, chat, with these different levels of inspiration, how do we want to interpret a haunted hill or barrow mound? Let me go back up in chat. Black Wolf is here. Hi, Black Wolf. I hope you're doing well. They drown, says Bubonic One. The final battle of the elves and halflings that finally created a peace or a ceasefire. Yeah, Tretch. We could consider that. I've got a video for said Sotol. Where would I drop it in Discord? If you want to put that in Table Talk, that's fine because we're talking about it. Or if you want to drop it under other art, that could be a place for it too. So there will be many races represented in these ghosts. Yeah, that could very well be Zulerpie. That watchtower has a large number of clerics and or paladins. Hey, Lysaria, welcome. Could that be the water level used? The water level used to be a lot lower and used to be a larger landmass that has slowly weathered and disappeared, and the civilization could just never let go of their land. Oh, yeah, yes, we could describe it that way. Or Rubus Hagrid wants a new pet. And hello, Ozzy. Oh, yeah, Hypnotic, I'm sorry. Got on such a tangent. So, yeah, I'll want to put this haunted hill somewhere. And, I'm sorry, one last thing to think about. And I will pop open that box of Tomb of Annihilation. Speaking of haunted areas in Chult. Oh, where was it? You know what? Did I lose it? I think I lost it. All right. That's fine. We have our life. Oh, the dungeon. In fact, the dungeon that was discovered could very well be some tunnels that had to be unsealed to let the people in to clear out the undead, the spiders, the indigenous people who've been kind of, you know, trying to reclaim their land by forming kind of a Maquis. If any of you are familiar with the Star Trek reference, kind of a Maquis, you know, insurgency within the Federation, which is a very, you know, a hierarchical thing. And so the dungeon doesn't even have to be like a lost pyramid. But of course, we could make a lost pyramid out here if we wanted to. That's a very, very bad, poorly drawn pyramid. But yeah, things to think about. So let's take a quick break. From map stuff. I'll pop open your box, Hypnotic, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to refresh my water and get a snack, and we're going to go back, and now I want to develop the city itself, okay?